Welcome back to Hardball. So, how is the war in Iraq really going? There's a big question. The Bush administration reported earlier this month that the security issue continues to be extremely challenging. The economic situation is uneven, and the Iraqi government is slow in progressing toward a democratic society. But Michael O'Hanlon of the Brookings Institution, who just returned from Iraq, says things are looking up. In an opinion piece in today's New York Times, he suggests the surge is working and there is enough good happening in the country to warrant sustaining U.S. efforts into 2008. On the other hand, Brian Katulis of the Center of American Progress says O'Hanlon's assessment is wrong, and worse, it's nothing more than propaganda to boost the war. Both gentlemen are with us tonight for the Hardball debate. Is the war in Iraq working? Michael, 8 days in Iraq. You went around the country, several different places, Tal Afar, Ramadi. And things are looking better to you. You are more optimistic now than you were, say, 6 months ago. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, although the political environment in Baghdad is still bad. And in the end, if that doesn't improve, there is no way we can find any kind of meaningful stability out of this effort. So this is a very interim result that Ken Pollack and I wrote about today in terms of military progress on the battlefield. But it's still rather striking. And I would frankly reject the claim that it's propaganda. We went and we tried to observe what was happening. We were very clear about the things that are not working well. This is honest assessment and reporting. It doesn't mean we're headed for victory in Iraq, but it's a very clear sense that we had in Iraq last week that the military aspect of this is finally beginning to show some results.
Brian, tough word, propaganda.
Well, I think it's very much a propaganda piece. Michael and Ken cherry-pick the facts. They only talk about certain parts of the country, and they ignore the fundamental premise of the surge, which was to get the politics working, to get Iraq's leaders to strike those political bargains. And what happened today? The Iraqi parliament decided they're going to go on summer vacation. There's very little progress, and what's more, I'm concerned that some of the forces that U.S. Military is aligned with right now actually are against our strategic interest in the region. We're actually boosting the power of some of the very militias that are aligned with Iran, some of the very forces that actually don't like Israel, that don't like Jordan and some of our allies in the region, and we're suffering from strategic confusion, and this is a big part of the problem with these interim assessments. We've heard it before from Michael and Ken and a few other analysts, and they've been wrong before, and I'm afraid that they're wrong again.
Michael, 8 days in Iraq, and you come back, and you say you're more optimistic than you were 6 months ago, and yet today, again, as is every day, 6 killed, 30 wounded in a bus explosion in Baghdad, and you just said that, without Baghdad being cohesive politically, nothing will work in Iraq, and yet nothing seems to be working in Baghdad. So how can you be optimistic?
I'm not optimistic. I said the military part of this strategy is working well enough to warrant a few more months of effort. And I really wish Brian would stick to the assessment. I think he's going to a little bit of a lower level than he usually does in attacking the credibility of the people trying to make this argument. I was one of the people saying 5 years ago, if you're going to go in and do this, you got to do it seriously, with a lot of force and a serious game plan. I've been a critic of the administration all along. I've been wrong sometimes. I've been right a fair number of times. I'd rather just debate this on the merits. We are not cherry-picking the facts. We talk about a number of places where there are good things going on, but we also say the sectarian problem has not by any means been resolved, and what we're talking about is a situation where there is some progress on the military front that I think permits us to try for a few more months to have some effort at political reconciliation. That's an inconvenient fact for someone who's already decided that the mission has failed, but it's the reality on the ground.
Brian, let me ask you, don't you think there is some level of success in some areas of Iraq?
I agree that there's some degrees of stability that's been increased stability in some parts of Iraq. But that is on the shoulders, and that's with forces, Sunni forces, Shiite forces, that we shouldn't trust and trust very closely. Plus, on top of that, a lot of these measures that the military is doing has been criticized by the Iraqi government. In fact, we've had reports that Prime Minister Maliki wants to throw General Petraeus out of the country because some of these programs to arm the tribal elements that Michael and a few others support are actually going against the grain of building a cohesive Iraqi national government. And on the part of cherry-picking, frankly, their piece ignores the whole southern part of Iraq, which is the Shiite part of Iraq, the majority of Iraq, where we don't have much of a presence. The Brits have actually decreased their presence, and it's a mess. And it's a big part of the problem where we're looking myopically at certain parts of the situation, not looking at the whole, and seeing the basic violence has not dropped considerably overall in the country, and the political process is stuck. And I think we got to call it like it is. And the more that we actually to wish and dream and hope that Iraq might be a certain way rather than calling it like it is, the further we get away from a solution.
So, Michael, tell Brian about Ramadi. And to my understanding, Ramadi is not a case of Shiites and Sunnis getting together and citizens getting together to throw al-Qaeda in Iraq out. It's a case of the United States Marine Corps doing extremely well with local leaders, is it not?
It is, although I frankly don't like the way Brian's making his argument, and I'm not going to just be the counterpoint on the right to his extreme view on the left. I will come back at you and say, in Baghdad, things are still a mess, and here Brian and I may agree. But what I'm trying to say is there are models that are starting to work in Nineveh province in the north, in Al-Anbar province in the west, in certain sectors around the city of Baghdad, and in a couple of neighborhoods of Baghdad. I think there's enough promise there to warrant a continuation of the effort for a few more months. I totally respect the point of view of someone who comes to the opposite conclusion, but let's please acknowledge where each other have serious data and serious arguments instead of stooping to this level of personal attack and calling people tools for propaganda. It's really not doing justice to the severity of the stakes we face here as a nation.
I completely agree. And the simple fact is, in many of the areas where you're citing progress, it rests upon the fact that we're actually working with sectarian police forces. There's been sectarian cleansing in Mosul, in the province that you're talking about. And a lot of the things that we're defining as progress, you're defining in your piece as progress, actually are the sorts of things that we're trying to guard against in terms of sectarian cleansing, actually are the sorts of things that we're trying to guard against in maintaining a unified Iraqi state. When we're actually developing security assistance programs that are aimed at undermining the Iraqi central government, it raises a big question about what are we actually doing with this strategy, and are we switching the basic terms of President Bush's surge strategy overall?
Brian Katulis, Michael O'Hanlon. Go ahead quickly, Michael.
It's a gamble, but what's the better policy? There is no better policy if you still are trying to salvage something. I think Brian has concluded, and it's fair.
The better policy is the one you advocated in 2004, where you said, set a date and let's get out and intensify our diplomatic efforts. That's the better policy.
Up next, the Hardball panel.